Hi, I'm Elaine Boddy.
And I'm David Treadway.
And you're listening to the Foodbod Pod
with Matthews Cotswold Flour
and Shanna's Sourdough. David, I've been sandwiched between two Sophies.
I know you have.
Let us explain. Firstly, welcome back, everybody that's listening. We're back with a podcast we're very excited about. We have got the return of Sophie Carey, the bakery development manager from Matthews Cotswold Flour, is back with us. She was with us a few episodes ago, baking up some amazing delights in my kitchen. But she's coming back this time with a festive special.
Can't wait to find out exactly what she's got in store for us, actually. She's always so inventive with her recipes.
Oh, absolutely. And I know she's made something special just for us. And it's just that for me, it's this whole other world of baking that I don't get into.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to watch her and listen to her. I don't think she realises, the tips on what she shares just without even thinking.
Yeah.
So we have Sophie Carey coming up. In our previous episode, our previous long episode, I was talking about making and managing sourdough into the colder temperatures. So if anybody is struggling with their sourdough at the moment, please do listen to the previous long episode. And before that was the other Sophie.
That's right,
Sophie Rushton-Smith.
Indeed.
So hence my comment of being sandwiched between two Sophies.
A Sophie sandwich.
Oh, absolutely.
No, actually, it's an Elaine sandwich.
That's right. Yes, they're the bread. Anyway, So we have endless amounts of delights for you in all of our episodes. But this one is going to be the pinnacle for our year. Sophie has come all the way again to my kitchen. And I'm curious to see what she's going to make. Well,
it's going to be interesting. This is the first time we've seen each other for quite a number of weeks because of summer holidays and this, that and the other. And I must tell you before we hand over to you and Sophie Carey about one of the highlights of my year, which has nothing to do with the podcast.
Oh, David.
It was my recent birthday present from my wife.
And how old were you, David?
I can't actually remember. That's how old I am. No, it was my 75th birthday, and my birthday present from my wife was a half-day course at the Rickstein Cookery School in Padstow.
Amazing.
In the southwest of England. He is just the most celebrated chef and cook, particularly when it comes to seafood. So I did the half-day fish and shellfish course. I now know how to fillet a sea bass.
Wow.
Which was one of the things I was looking forward to most. So it was a really, really wonderful weekend. And we stayed down in Padstow in Cornwall, where the whole Rickstein operation is based. And we just had the most wonderful weekend. Some great food as well. We ate in the seafood restaurant. One of the other things we cooked on the course was grilled scallops. And the other really good tip I learned, it's not about how long you cook scallops, it's what temperature you cook them at.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So don't bother with timers, just make sure you cook them to the right temperature, which in the case of scallops is about 40 degrees.
Okay.
That's when you bring them out from under the grill, and by the time you've served them, they will have reached about 45 degrees and they're perfect.
Oh, wow.
So that's centigrade. So it was those kind of little tips.
Yeah.
And the whole course was following the maxims and the habits of a professional kitchen. So if the chef tutor asked us to do something, we had to respond in the correct way.
Yeah, chef.
Well, that's what I thought it would be, but actually in professional kitchens, it's French. It's oui chef.
Oui chef.
Oui chef.
Okay.
So oui chef, non chef, but it's always oui chef.
Okay.
And that's the way you answer and say, yes, I understand. It's
Yeah.
a bit like flying a helicopter. You've got control, I've got control.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of thinking. And it was just a fabulous 4 hours. Quite a lot of wine.
I was going to say, did they do the knife skills before all the wine?
Well, that was one of the first things
all
we
being
did.
consumed.
Yes. But of course you cook and then you eat what you've cooked. And there's also a demo, which was a cod and lobster chowder.
Wow.
Which was spectacular. but we didn't get to do that. I don't think they were willing to waste the lobsters on us.
It sounds fabulous.
It was really
amazing
really
present.
Good. Yeah, it was super.
Yeah.
And I've been wanting to do it for a long time. My son-in-law Jamie did one many years ago and still talks about it as one of his highlights from his sort of cooking experience. So yeah, it was great. So thank you, Helen.
And happy birthday from everyone at the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Which is me.
Which is you, yes. That's very nice of you, yes. So, look, enough about me and cookery courses. Let's get back to what we're really here for, which is, on this occasion, hearing from you and Sophie Carey.
Sophie, you're back.
I'm back.
You're back in my kitchen. We're talking festive baking.
Yes.
At the end of October.
Very festive.
Yeah. This is what we do. When you record it compared to when it goes out, it's often two different times.
Yeah.
But we have got you back here especially because I think you're going to make something special for us.
Yes.
And also we want to pick your brain about festive baking tips and anything that's going to help people at this time of year because this is, big baking season.
Hosting, baking, loads of people around, busy. Yeah.
And the opportunity to play and bake and do all those things. Really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us what recipe you have created.
So I've done a recipe today which is to be as your Christmas dessert.
Right.
I don't like Christmas pudding.
Me
like
neither.
Most people I think of my generation, I just hate it. I think it's horrible.
Yeah.
So I never have Christmas pudding, but I've designed this dessert to be as impressive as Christmas pudding. It's a twist on a baked Alaska, but it's a spiced pear baked Alaska tart. So Christmas is all about maximalism.
Wow. Yeah.
This is a maximalist dessert. So it's a pastry case, dams and jam, frangipane with lots of spices and orange zest, plums, vanilla ice cream, and then Swiss meringue, which we're going to blowtorch as well. So it'll be very special.
Wow. So that sounds to me like a lot of processes.
It is quite a lot of processes, but they're all quite simple processes. And there are ways that you can cut it down. So you could make your own jam. I'm using one that I like to buy. You could make your own ice cream. I'm using one that I like to buy.
Okay.
The rest of it is actually pretty straightforward. I mean, you don't even have to blind bake the pastry case. It just all goes in the oven with the frangipane in it. So it's really easy.
Cool. Well, easy for you, of course, because you are the baking goddess.
I think it'd be easy for most people. But yeah, it's a good time to really take the time with a few nice processes and enjoy it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not the same kind of baker as you anyway, much as I've had a go and I do every so often. But pastry is never really my thing.
Yeah.
So why is my pastry ending up tough?
It could be tough if it's overworked.
Right.
It could be tough if you haven't left it to rest for long enough in the fridge before you bake it. It could be tough because it's a bit too thick. I'm doing a different style of pastry today. It's similar to a shortcrust, but it's more of an American style shortcrust. And my issue with pastry is everyone says, with shortcrust especially, got to rest it all the time, mix it into a dough, rest it, roll it out, rest it, and it just creates overworked pastry. So for me, I like to do all of the first bit at room temperature. My butter isn't even chilled, it's just room temperature. Get it into a dough, roll it out, get it in the tin, and then it has its rest. That way, in the end, you're actually doing less work on it.
So are you mixing the butter into the flour with your fingertips?
Yes. So butter into the flour, fingertips, but you don't want it to be breadcrumbs like in English shortcrust pastry. You want a few larger flakes there because the American version also has a couple of laminations in it as well, which just helps to kind of keep it really nice and flaky, short, without overworking it.
Okay.
We're also adding some apple cider vinegar to the water that you use to mix the dough up. That also helps to keep it short. The acid really stops it from becoming kind of overworked and gummy. And also, when you're doing that sort of kind of like laminations, it means that you're getting a really well-structured dough without, again, kneading it all the time. This is also a much wetter dough than an English shortcrust pastry. So again, easier to work with. You're not kind of kneading it as much.
Does it make any difference that I have used a mixer? to mix the butter and flour?
I think in general it's best to do it by hand.
Okay.
Just pulsing it in the mixer is always better if you're going to do it in a mixer or a food processor. Sometimes I make it in the food processor.
Yeah.
Just want to pulse it until it's like breadcrumbs. You don't want to leave it going for ages.
Okay, well which is probably what I've done.
Yeah,
and
perhaps.
Food processor. Bzzz.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so just a lack of knowledge.
Yeah,
really.
yeah, well.
Okay. Yeah, well, yeah, That's why we're here, we're learning. So with pastry, if someone wanted to make this recipe, then you could, pastry can be the make ahead bit, can't it?
You could make this weeks in advance and put it in the freezer. The pastry bit, that can, you make that, you get it in your tart case, get it in the freezer, then you can just pull it out when you're ready to bake. Even going all the way up to almost the last step, you could make the Frangipane tart essentially and leave that in the freezer for a week. And then when you're ready to put it all together, you just need to defrost it thoroughly. And then you add the ice cream and the meringue, so
cool.
You don't actually need to do it all on the day. You could do a bit of it the day before, you could do it the week before.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, well, I know you need to start making your pastry, so what's the starting point here?
So first off, it's flour and butter.
Okay.
I like to use salted butter rather than unsalted. Because for me it always needs seasoning, sweet things.
This does take me back, I must admit, to school years when I was taught the whole fingertip jobby, because we made crumble at school and stuff like that. I mean, who really ever came up with that?
It's just one of those things. It's almost like because it's always been done that way, we just kept doing it that way. I'm not saying that way doesn't work, especially they talk all the time about keeping stuff cold,
Yeah.
I never really understood it because it's going back in the fridge anyway. So as long as it's workable for you, if it gets, really warm and melted, it's going to be quite difficult to work with it. But as long as it's workable for you, because it's getting a big long rest in the fridge anyway, why does it need to be cold right at the start, especially for this style of pastry where it's essentially just a pimped up short crust.
Nice. So let me just take people through so they know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you've got your bowl on the scales and the first thing you've done is just chop up some butter that's gone into it. So how much butter have we got?
150 grams of salted butter.
Okay. And so that's just cut into chunks, so it's easier for you to start mixing it.
Yeah.
And now
and
in
then
with flour.
250 grams.
And you're using all-purpose flour.
I am, yeah. I find all-purpose is really, really good for this sort of pastry because it's quite extensible, so it's got a nice stretch to it. So when you're kind of trying to do the couple of laminations that we're going to do, it's not putting up a fight with you or anything like that. It's quite easy to work with, and it doesn't then shrink back too much in the tart tin.
If someone can't find all-purpose flour, in this country, could they use plain flour?
Yeah, plain will be fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've got a teaspoon of sugar going into the pastry now?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that should be fine. If you're not using salted butter, then this would be the point to add a little sprinkle of salt, just fine salt. But that's why I like using salted butter, because it just takes that out of it.
Okay, cool.
And yeah, now that's all together. So just going to start rubbing the fat into the flour. You're just kind of literally pinching it, rubbing it through. Like I said, for this sort of style of pastry, you want a couple of flakes of butter left in it. We'll see when it's done, but you don't want it to be fine breadcrumbs like it normally is. So you can take this a little bit too far, but even if you do, it will be fine because the laminations really help to keep it flaky.
So really, it's all about the fingertips, isn't it?
Yes.
And just rubbing the butter into the flour or the flour into the butter until it breaks up into smaller pieces.
A bit of patience. That's why I quite like this recipe for as we get into Christmas. Quite nice to get in the kitchen and take your time with something. Having a moment to yourself when you're hosting everyone all the time, or you're running around seeing people. It's quite nice just to get alone, have some quiet time, and spend some time very therapeutically rubbing fat into flour.
Yeah, I hear you. Do you subscribe to the need to be having cool hands?
No, I do. If I appreciate the requirement for cooler temperatures for making things like puff pastry, even rough puff pastry, you do want to keep things cooler because in that you're relying on the butter staying cool to give you the rise.
Yeah. Because
in short crust we're not looking for rise, there's no need for you to be trying to keep everything ice cold all the time. Okay. I just like to kind of work at room temperature because again, like I said, it just all goes, this pastry is all going to go into the fridge for a big rest anyway. So as long as it's not melted, it's fine.
You get
There
to
you
the
go.
point where it looks like a crumble mix. don't
Yeah,
you?
that's exactly it. So you can see there's some like larger clumps in there,
Yeah.
which will turn into flakes of butter. But it's exactly like a crumble mix. That's quite right. So that's done.
So it's okay that you've got a few extra lumps in there.
Yeah,
You're okay
that's what
with
you
that?
want. That's what you want
Yeah.
for this one.
Okay.
Unlike with traditional English shortcrust where you want it very, very fine,
Yeah.
you actually want the lumps in this because it's going to
Okay.
help to keep it really nice and kind of flaky and tender.
Okay.
What I'm then going to do is weigh out into this bowl directly over the butter and flour and sugar is 100 grams of water.
It always amazes me how the tiny amount of water that you need for making pastry.
It is, and this is quite a lot for pastry. Normally pastry is, you literally bring it together with about a teaspoon of water. With this American method, it's much, much, much more.
And tell us again then, what does adding apple cider vinegar do to it?
So the acid basically prevents the gluten from forming too strong of a bond, which helps to keep the pastry short. So
And
that's
does
why
that
we
work
add
with
it.
any vinegar, or you just prefer to use apple
I
cider
prefer
vinegar?
to use apple cider because I think you don't get much flavour from it, but the flavour is more in keeping with sort
What
of
you're
desserts
making.
and things.
So, I mean,
but
I
you
can
could just
smell
use
that 'cause
white
it's quite
vinegar.
strong.
Don't use malt vinegar, but you could use white vinegar.
So you are going to taste that a little bit in there, are you?
You probably won't. You probably won't. But I just prefer to use something that if you ever were to taste it, it's in keeping at least with the product.
So you're going to go in with a knife first
Just
to start mixing
table
this.
knife just to start kind of combining it all together. We should end up with actually quite a soft pastry dough. And when it's got to a point where it's all clumped together, I'll tip it out onto the counter and just bring it into a ball.
Okay.
So you can see in there, you still got some
Yes,
quite
you
large
still see some big clumps of butter
clumps
in
of
it.
butter,
Okay.
which is perfect.
So you're going to go in initially with the knife and then go in with your hands.
Yeah, I'm just going to tip it out. It's pretty much together except for a few crumbs at the bottom. Tip that out and it's quite a soft dough. So you don't want to knead it too much because you obviously still want those clumps of butter to be present. You don't want to kind of smush them too much.
So basically, very quick. I mean, that's taken hardly much effort at all.
Yeah.
To just knead it gently.
Yeah.
And bring it together into a pastry.
Exactly, and it's much softer.
It is.
Than a
so you're making indents
standard
in
pastry.
it.
Yeah. From here, what I'm going to do is just sprinkle the counter with a little bit of extra flour. You do need to do this with this one because it's a softer pastry. So the key is just keeping it floured. And then I'm just going to roll it out to, I normally aim for about the thickness of kind of a couple of pound coins stacked on top of each other.
Okay.
You don't really need to be too precise with it, but you're just basically rolling it to...
So you're not picking up and turning the pastry.
No.
You're moving the rolling pin round.
Yeah, it's just too soft of a dough at this point because because we've not chilled it in the fridge yet. You don't want to be trying to kind of manipulate it too much. Save all of that for when it's
Hang on. So you've
chilled.
rolled it into a
It's
rectangle.
a big rectangle.
Yeah, and then you're going to fold it.
I'm going to fold it like a letter. So 1/3 down from the top, 1/3 up from the bottom. So it's folded like a letter, and then I'll turn it and make sure that it's still got flour underneath it.
And this is what lamination is.
Yes,
the
this
folding.
is lamination, yeah.
And the lamination creates.
Well, normally when you do puff pastry, when you've got layers of butter and dough, the lamination is what creates rise. In this pastry, we are doing that to an extent, but because there's no real distinction between the butter and the dough except the small clumps of butter, really we're creating kind of almost like a hybrid between a flaky pastry and a shortcrust pastry.
Okay.
I've only really started doing this method recently because I was looking into it for an American recipe that I was doing. But I found that I just preferred to work with it than English.
Okay. So you've rolled it to
English
another
shortcrust pastry.
rectangle, and then you're going to fold it
The
again.
same again, yeah.
So top to the
Top
down,
to the middle
bottom
and then
up.
bottom up. And
So
then,
you've got a nice folded parcel.
yeah, and we're going to do that just one more time.
Okay.
And you can feel the dough is getting a bit more firm.
Yeah, I can
as I
see
do this,
it as
you
you're
know?
working with it.
It's not as soft and kind of like squashy.
We've just got a nice little parcel then, again, in front of us.
Yes, correct. I'm just going to roll this out now and it's going to go in the tin and then that's all going to go in the fridge.
Right, okay. So you could use this pastry as your version of shortcrust.
Yeah, Yeah. And I would recommend it, you know, anyone who's really struggled with pastry before. It's a bit more forgiving than like traditional English shortcrust.
Would you use this kind of pastry for your mince pies?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
It would be a really nice pastry for mince pies. Quite often I make my own mince pies and I put a bit of cheese in the pastry. It's about 80% butter and then 20% is cheddar
like a
cheese.
Sharp cheese?
Yeah, like really sharp cheddar.
Cool.
Because I quite like the mix of sweet and savoury.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, but that's no different from, it's like a chutney.
Yeah.
I mean, mincemeat is
mincemeat
like
is
chutney.
so much like a chutney, yeah.
Yeah. So cheese and chutney, that makes sense to me. I've never heard that before.
I also do, make cheese on toast with my panettone as well.
Yes. I'm totally with you on that one. Anything kind of fruit loafy, I will eat the cheese.
So that's rolled out to about the thickness that I want. So I've got my tart tin, which has got flour in it, but this is a 23 centimetre.
So Sophie has got this lovely big square of pastry that she's now lifting up onto the rolling pin to be able to then
kind of drape it into the tart tin.
Drape it over your tin.
And you just want to be careful to be gentle with it at this point.
So you're just using your knuckles just to push it in a little bit?
Yeah, you just lift it and kind of push it down into the corners. And then what we're going to do is trim it, but not trim it all the way, because I want it to rest in the fridge with a little bit of excess,
right?
Which will firstly give you a bit of a buffer, because as it rests, it will shrink back a tiny bit. But also it just means when it's fully kind of set in the fridge, the pastry, you're able to really push it into the indents of the tin without it breaking or becoming too thin. But I do like to trim a little bit off just so it's not weighed down too much.
So you're just gently using your knuckles just to push it into the corners a little bit?
Yeah, literally just in the corners, not really into the fluting.
So you've used a fluted tin for this, but it doesn't have to be.
No, it doesn't even have to be round. You could do this in a tray baked tin if you wanted to. If you're feeding a lot of people, it's sometimes much easier to... You get the kind of really long rectangular patisserie tins. Yeah. If I'm having a lot of people around for Christmas, I would do it in one of those, and that way you can cut slices straight across, much easier. So what I'm going to do now is trim off a lot of the excess until you've got just over about an inch left around it.
All right, so it's still draping over the sides, and you're letting it drape right over that much. Okay.
I just want enough off so that it's not being dragged down and it's not difficult to get it in and out of the fridge. But you want to still have some left so that you can adjust as you press it in a little bit more. But this does create some offcuts, and what you can do with these offcuts is you could make them into mince pies, you could make them into little jam tarts. Sometimes I roll pastry like this out and just top it with a bit of grated cheese, and you got little cheesy biscuits then, that's fine.
Well, my grandmother, when she used to make mince pies, there was always a bit left, and she just used to... roll it up with a bit of jam and bake that, and that was your extra bit.
Exactly. So that's it for the time being. It's just going to go in the fridge.
So we've got the pastry case full of pastry. It's just going to go in the fridge and cool. And how long would you leave it in the fridge for?
Ideally about half an hour. You could do this bit and even just put it in the fridge overnight. It doesn't have to go in the freezer, you know, if you were doing this.
So it doesn't need to be covered, it's just going in the fridge like that?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Cool.
Thank you.
Shanna's Sourdough has everything you need to start making beautiful sourdough, from the starter to the roaster and everything in between.
Matthews Cotswold Regenerative All-Purpose Flour is the first of its kind in the UK and designed for everyday baking. It's milled from a blend of the highest quality regeneratively farmed wheats to produce a fine consistency, rich in flavour. Regenerative all-purpose white flour can be used for making breads and brioche, pastry, cakes, shortbreads, sauces, and a variety of fantastic savoury or sweet baked goods. Matthews Cotswold Regenerative All-Purpose Flour.
Pastry's in the fridge.
Yep.
What do we need to do next?
So this is a good time to prep the plums that are going to go on top of the Frangipane. I was just saying before, even without the ice cream and the meringue, this makes quite a nice dessert just as it is.
Well, yeah.
So if you're not got that much of a sweet tooth, it's probably, you know, a good way to split it off there. But essentially the pastry case can be filled with the dabs and jam and then the Frangipane, and then it has the plums sitting on top. So you want them to look nice. So basically what you want to do is half them and take the core out, and then split them into 8s so that you can put them nicely kind of facing upwards across the whole dish.
And have you got a particular choice of plum that you prefer to use?
No, I think the darker colour that they are, the better for this sort of recipe. I prefer to eat the green, plums, but for this recipe it looks quite nice when you've got the bright purple skin.
And it all starts to feel a bit festive, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And they don't need to be particularly ripe as well. I will say that, plums quite often, they taste amazing even if they're not that ripe.
But especially if you're going to cook them.
Yeah, you're going to cook them, so you don't want them to be too squishy when you first put them on, but also it will help to keep the dessert, that sharpness that you want.
Yeah.
So much nicer eat if they're actually a little bit firm.
I've got a recipe in my new book, which is a sweet focaccia, which is made with an enriched dough and with plums on the top.
Nice.
And you get that scenario where you've pushed the plums into it and it bakes. It's that bit of the bread underneath that's so nice. It tastes as if you've added almost like
it's like jammy,
a custardy bit to it when you haven't.
Yeah.
It's like the best bit of it
Yeah,
to be.
yeah.
And because of writing the recipes and doing it during the winter, or there was a time when there wasn't many plums around, and the plums that I had to use, some of them were not very ripe.
Yeah.
Because of the time of year, and I just couldn't get them to ripen. And actually, but then when baking them, the roasting made them sweeter anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So it worked.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Plums also, for me, I found that they're not a fruit in particular where the flavour doesn't appear right until they're ripe. They're quite flavoursome even when they're unripe. They're just quite tart. So we're just going to halve these and then take the cores out. So you just kind of run the knife all the way around the edge, and then you can twist it open.
Right, and take out the
just
stone.
pop the stone out with your thumb.
I think there's just nothing nicer than roasted. I love roasted fruit anyway, but roasted stone fruits I think are lovely. I just think you bring out such nice flavour.
Yeah. So they're all halved, and then you just want to kind of cut each half in half, and then each half in half again. So you end up with 8
so you've got some nice little slices.
8 little wedges of plum.
So Frangipane, my understanding is that's almond.
Yes.
So you're using almond flour?
Ground almonds, yeah, ground almonds, which also means that it stays moist for quite a long time.
Okay.
So particularly good if you want to make this bit the day before, it will, or even a couple of days before, it will keep really well.
Okay.
Also, if you're going to make it and freeze it, it will help retain the moisture really well, even through freezing and defrosting.
I've never made Frangipane, so what goes into Frangipane?
Frangipane is ground almonds. It's butter, it's flour, sugar, eggs. There's no raising agent in it. It's quite a dense cake. Traditionally, you'd have almond essence or almond oil as well to it, but I like to put in this one orange zest and some spices as well, just to kind of festive it up. Okay. I'm also not a fan of an artificial kind of almond flavour, so for Christmas I really hate marzipan and stollen and everything like that. I don't like it, so I prefer to make my Frangipane just with the fresh kind of ground almonds. But otherwise it's pretty traditional sort of cake mix. You just mix it up, creaming the butter and sugar together, and then add the rest of it in.
Okay, so Frangipane is basically a cake.
Yeah, just a
cake. Because you can make cakes with just the Frangipane mix. Like tray bakes and stuff.
Yeah. And they, like I said, they keep so well. So if I'm making cakes for friends who are unwell or family or whatever, I quite often would do Frangipane cakes because they just keep for such a long time, so there's no pressure to kind of eat it all on the same day. A lot of cakes, if you want them to keep, you can just add a couple of tablespoons of ground almonds. You have to compensate and add a bit more liquid, but it helps them to keep really nicely. Yeah. You
wouldn't take out a couple of spoonfuls of flour to replace it with the ground almonds?
You could do, but then you have to think about the flour is also adding to that cake for its properties. So if you take out all of the flour and you end up with lots of ground almonds, it'll be very moist, but it won't hold its shape. So if you cut a slice, it'll crumble. So you have to weigh up that balance, especially if you're using a self-raising flour. If you take some of that flour out and put more ground almonds in, the cake won't rise as much. So you have to kind of think about what the flour is also adding to it. So they're done for now.
Are all
so
chopped up
leave
and done.
those be.
Okay.
And then we can just also zest the oranges that we need for the Frangipane as well. So it's just a good idea while the pastry's chilling, just to get the rest of these kind of little jobs done. That's a nice bowl.
All of my bowls are beautiful.
Yeah, I know,
Because they've
very
all been
nice.
handmade by the fabulous Jill at Sitch Farm,
Oh.
who currently now, very excitingly, has her products in Fortnum and Mason
Oh my
in
God.
central London.
I love Fortnum and Mason. Great space to go for Christmas as well.
Oh, lovely.
Christmas shopping in Fortnum and Mason.
I think going to Fortnum's at Christmas is just part of a tradition, really.
Yeah, and I like buying little foodie presents from there because people would never normally buy it for themselves. You know, you would not go and buy your lemon curd from Fortnum and Mason, but it's quite nice to buy people something special.
Oh, my grandmother always wanted biscuits from Fortnum's so
The
that she
tea
could
is
have
great.
the tin.
Yeah.
And the tea only so that when her friends came round that she could get the tins out to just impress everybody.
Yeah. So I am just using a couple of oranges for this, but if you had lots of clementines or little, you know, mini like easy peelers and stuff, because you get them around at Christmas all the time, you could use a couple of those. And then you can, if you just eat the orange afterwards, but you can slice it. I like to do dried orange decorations.
Yeah.
So you just slice them up, not too thin, but also not too thick, about the thickness of a pound coin. And then I dehydrate them either in the oven overnight or in my air fryer.
Yeah.
Has a dehydrator setting. And then you just string them up and they look so nice.
Or push cloves into
Yeah.
the skin of the orange to make decorations. They smell amazing.
Yeah.
I get a feeling Christmas is probably lovely in your house.
I love Christmas. It's one of my favourite times. I love Christmas.
I don't think I've ever seen such perfectly, beautifully zested oranges. I mean, look at that. It's
Can't waste
virtually
any.
still round.
Yeah, well, you don't want to get any of the pith underneath because that's the bitter part. So quite important to be gentle and methodical, otherwise you'll end up with too much of the pith, which is the white bit underneath the zest.
I mean, this is dedication here with all the bits and pieces that you're doing, which, I mean, to me is a joy.
Yeah. And again, you don't need to, you can add in, if you don't want to do this or you don't have time to do it, you can leave it out or you can add in a bit of orange oil, anything like that. But again, it's quite nice at Christmas, you know, if you want to make this dessert for your Christmas table, to spend the time, you know, working on it and put the love into it. Because it does make a difference at the end when you've got this beautiful tart. You know, it looks so nice and it tastes amazing, and everyone always remembers it then after that. You know, they remember the dessert being amazing at Christmas because it's kind of, well, you just never stop eating, do you? We used to always go to my grandparents for Christmas, and my grandma she would do like 4 or 5 different desserts for the Christmas table, and there would always be a Christmas pudding, even though only about 3 of us like it. There would always be a cheesecake, especially since I got married, because my husband loves passion fruit cheesecake, or he said he did once and she never let that go had to make it every single time.
Right.
There's always this boozy chocolate thing, which I don't like alcohol in my food, so I never liked that one, but it's like a sherry sort of chocolatey cake.
Okay.
And something else, but there was always custard. And my cousin and I used to fight over who would get the skin on top of the custard, because I think it's the best bit.
It sounds like my mother-in-law's table for every roast, every weekend, there would always be 3 different desserts.
Yeah.
And Graham, my husband, would have all 3.
Yeah.
All in the
A bit
same
of
bowl.
everything. Yeah. Oh, there'd always be a panna cotta as well, but made in an old ice cream tub. So they're zested, that's done.
Smells amazing.
And then we can get the Frangipane started.
Right.
So I like to make the Frangipane in the mixer, but you can do it
Okay,
by hand
so
if
I've
you
got
like.
the KitchenAid out for this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
It starts out with creaming together butter and sugar.
Yeah.
And it's 100 grams of butter and then 125 grams of sugar.
And that's going to go on the mixer.
Just sort of a medium speed for a couple of minutes until it's really light and fluffy.
So we're in the mixer and we're just giving it a turn to mix the sugar and the butter together. Creaming is the proper term.
Yes.
Creaming the sugar and butter, as I remember.
It's quite important with Frangipane to cream the butter and sugar rather than doing the all-in-one method,
Right.
which is where you just chuck everything in together, because there's no raising agent in Frangipane apart from eggs, you know, and we don't even whisk the eggs. So
you want the air
the
from
air
this.
getting
Yeah.
in. Yeah.
Okay. Are we fully creamed?
Yep, fully creamed. You've got the butter and sugar in there that's nice and light and pale now, and fluffy.
Gosh, there's not a lot, is there?
No, not very much, no. Because this is just one layer of quite a multi-layered dessert. You don't actually need that much frangipane, but also just doesn't take that much sugar really to sweeten it up. The only thing we want to do now before we make the rest of the frangipane is to preheat the oven, about 180 Celsius, and preferably with a baking tray in it, heating at the same time.
So about 350 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. The point of the baking tray, and actually where preheating comes to the advantage here, is that because we don't blind bake this pastry case, you want the baking tray to be hot when it goes into the oven, so it's immediately baking the base, making sure that it's not soggy. To this, I'm going to add our orange zest.
So the orange zest is going in with the creamed butter and sugar.
Yeah, I'm also adding about a teaspoon of vanilla bean paste, and then I'm going to add also, again, about a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Yeah. And then another about half a teaspoon of, this is just mixed spice.
So for everyone that's going to ask, the mixed spice in this country includes cinnamon, coriander seed, nutmeg, clove, pimento and ginger. Yeah. So if it's not something that you have on your shelves, you can create a mix of it, which you'll find a recipe online.
Yeah, or you could just use any spice that you like. You know, the whole point of this is just that it makes a nice spiced frangipane. But if you didn't have mixed spice, you could just use a little bit of nutmeg or just cinnamon or a little bit of clove.
Create the same kind of thing.
Just want something kind of warming and festive.
But what we're talking about here is mixed spice as opposed to allspice, which is a spice on its own.
Yeah, allspice.
Which is a pepper.
Yeah.
As opposed to mixed spice, this is a mix of spices.
Yes. So don't get them mixed up. Allspice is a lovely flavour, and you could put a pinch of allspice in this if you wanted to. Yeah. But don't add half a teaspoon of allspice.
No, because that's
very
a strong thing. Okay, so they're two separate things.
I am also going to add 2 eggs. Doesn't matter the size. And then before I add in the flour and the ground almonds, I'm just going to get that back on for another mix in the kitchen. Okay.
All right, so that was on for 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And you actually got to a point where you turned it up quite high.
Yeah, it's going to look a bit curdled, and that's why I turned it up quite high, is because when you're mixing butter and eggs, it's essentially a game of temperatures. You know, the butter is cooler than the egg, and therefore it splits apart. I like to add the flour and the ground almonds by hand, just so that you don't overmix them, and that way you can make sure it's all nicely incorporated. It's not very much flour for this, it's just 50 grams.
So we're back on the scales, adding 50 grams of the all-purpose flour.
And then it's 175 of ground almonds. And now I'm just going to fold it all together.
So you're using the spatula just to fold it?
Yes. You're basically stirring it through, but without beating it.
Right.
So it's called folding because you're basically coming under something and folding it over to incorporate whatever it is you're trying to incorporate.
So the action tends to be, doesn't it? You cut down the middle with your spatula, go round and turn it over.
Exactly. Cut down through, go round. And you end up with actually a very stiff sort of cake mix. That's exactly what you want. Frangipane is quite stiff. It's not a pourable cake mix. Right. It's one that you kind of spread out. And that's what gives you the really nice sort of dense...
It is like a paste, isn't
it?
Yeah,
okay. Dense and delicious sort of cake. And that's the frangipane done for the time being. So what we need to do next is get the tart tin out of the fridge and trim it properly, and then we can start assembling it.
Shanna's Sourdough for all of your sourdough baking equipment needs. Find Shanna's Sourdough on Facebook, Instagram, at YouTube, and at shannassourdough.myshopify.com.
Matthews Cotswold Regenerative All-Purpose Flour is the first of its kind in the UK and designed for everyday baking. Try the on-pack recipe for hummingbird cake or visit cotswoldflour.com for more recipe ideas.
So this has been in the fridge, what, about half an hour?
Yeah, so the pastry's really
it's
firmed
really,
up.
Yeah, really firmed
But really
up.
interesting, you can see how much some of it's shrunk.
Yes, it's pulled straight back in, which is why I don't like to trim it completely before that. What I'm just going to do before I do anything else is just go around and use I suppose that's the shin of your finger, isn't it? To push the pastry into each one of
into the flutes.
You could use a wooden spoon for this as well. It doesn't need to be perfect. It will all settle in eventually. You just want to make sure that it's all in the gaps.
So just basically using your fingers to push pastry into the fluting shape.
Exactly. Plus that way you know how much you can trim.
Okay.
So now that's all in like that, I can trim this pastry case.
Right.
If I was going to be blind baking, I wouldn't trim this now. I would put this into blind bake
and then trim it off afterwards.
And then trim it with a serrated knife afterwards.
Okay.
When it's sort of about halfway through the blind bake. Blind baking does tend to cause pastry to shrink again.
Right.
Whereas if you're baking it with something in there, then you don't get that effect.
Okay.
For me, I like to trim it, I would roll my rolling pin over it.
Okay, so just rolling it over the top so it pushes it against the edges of the pan.
Exactly. But you could use a knife if you want to, but because my pan is fluted, using a knife doesn't always give you
oh wow, look at
the
that.
best effect.
Absolute perfection.
So there you have your pastry case.
Wow.
And I just like to go round again because I just rolled it. That's pushed the pastry down. So I just like to go round and just give it another quick.
Just like you've done it before.
Just like I have. I forgot to say at the start, this is a loose bottomed tart tin.
So you can push it up.
Which is much, much, much better. If you don't have a loose bottom tart tin, I would really recommend getting one, and in particular a heavy metal one.
Do you need a spoon?
Yes, please. So I've got damson jam for the bottom of this. If you don't like damson jam, you could use any one you like. I like this one from Bon Maman. And it's a couple of tablespoons, a couple of good tablespoons, which I think ends up being just over half a jar.
Okay, and just going to spread that into the bottom of the pastry case.
You don't want too much, because if you have too much jam, it could end up bubbling out, which is fine, but it doesn't look that nice. And it's also a bit too sweet then. If you wanted to, if you found that this is a bit sweet, I do think you want a jam on the bottom, otherwise the frangipane can be a bit dry.
Yeah.
But what you can do is add your few tablespoons of jam to a bowl and then add in a squeeze of lemon, just to sharpen it up. Or if anyone does sort of beer making or wine making, you might have citric acid in the house. You can just add a little sprinkle of citric acid to it.
So we've just got a nice thin layer of jam going in the bottom.
Yeah, so that's about enough there. It's really not very much, but just enough that it will give you a good flavour. Then what I like to do is put my frangipane in, and because it's quite thick, this frangipane,
you just want to dollop it, don't you?
Yeah, you want to dollop it, but start from the outside.
Surely if you were trying to just spread that in, you're just going to mix it up with the jam and lose the layers.
So you want to dollop it in kind of evenly across the tart, but start from the outside, because you can always spread inwards, but it's quite difficult to spread outwards.
Okay, so you just tip central.
Well, you just pick these things up when you've baked enough stuff.
Yeah, that's true. When you have enough of these things going through your kitchen, it's second nature.
Exactly.
Oh, I feel the need for a frangipane sourdough.
That would be nice.
There must be some easy way of doing that.
That would be a good Christmassy one. Good for Easter as well. I tend to make a lot of frangipane stuff for Easter. I suppose almonds are quite Eastery. So now that I've gone all the way around the outside, I'm just kind of filling in where I see there are gaps.
Will you attempt to smooth that down a bit?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. So that's all in the tin. So I'm just really gently going to use my palette knife.
Mini palette knife.
Yeah, best offset. So if you're going to invest in a little bit of equipment for your home kitchen, I always say you just need one or two of these, one in this size and then one in a slightly larger size.
Little palette knives.
Little palette knives, but always get them offset, because they're so much more helpful that way. And there's nothing that you can't do with it.
Offset means the ones with a little step in.
Yes.
As opposed to just a straight flat palette knife.
Yeah. You want to make sure that you've not got any of the jam spilling out over the top here. So if you ever push it across and it pushes some of the jam up, just try and take some from a different area and plug
so cover it back over.
Yeah, plug that hole up. Wow.
Oh, that looks perfect.
So that's all smoothed out nicely. It doesn't really matter if it's level or anything like that, because it will sort of self-level in the oven. And especially because what we're going to do now is put the plums on top.
Okay.
So you can do this any kind of design that you like. What I think looks nice is just going around with the skin side sort of up, so that you
all facing the same way.
Yeah,
to make
I
it
just
pretty.
think that looks nice. But also, if you're going to cover it with ice cream and meringue, you don't necessarily see this, but the perfectionist in me needs it to look very lovely, even though it gets covered up. But this is the part to pay attention to if you don't plan on using the ice cream and the meringue, because this will be the finished product then. So you want it to look amazing for the Christmas table. So
Sophie is just pushing the segments just gently into the frangipane.
Yeah.
Wow!
So
that looks amazing.
That needs to bake on the preheated baking tray in the oven, and it's probably going to go for 40 minutes, maybe even slightly longer.
Okay.
Frangipane does take a little bit of time to bake all the way through, and because we don't have a blind bake pastry case, we want to make sure that that's really nice and crisp too.
So the pie is in the oven.
Yep. There we are.
And I didn't check, so I put it on 180, but it's a fan oven.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that all right? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. For me, for this sort of stuff, oven temperatures are not so vital.
Okay.
Anywhere from 170 up to 190, 200 is fine. If you see it starting to get too brown on top and the frangipane isn't cooked yet, then you can always put some tin foil over it and put the temperature down a little bit. But you know, it will be fine. Because of the almonds in there, it's quite forgiving.
Fabulous, right. We're now eating bits of plum. We're going to just clean down and on to the next bit. We have the most beautiful tart in front of us, Sophie, that I would want to just cut into like that myself, I have to say. But you're about to pimp it.
Yes.
So,
for me, Christmas is all about maximalism, so I'm about to make this a maximalist dessert. But if you do want it as a minimalist
can I just say,
dessert...
never heard maximalist. I've heard minimalist, but never maximalist.
Oh, you want to come to my house? My house is maximalist. There's stuff everywhere.
Maximalist.
If you were going to keep it plain, before you put it in the oven, it's a good idea just to sprinkle it while it's unbaked, just with some caster sugar on top, because it helps it to really kind of shine.
Okay.
And then you could just dust it with icing sugar, and that's completely fine.
So you could serve it like
just serve it like that, and it would be very delicious.
The edging is just perfection. I mean, just
it comes
superstar
out very
stuff.
nice, yeah. But I am going to top it with ice cream and then meringue to make it into a baked Alaska tart. So I've already got my ice cream setting in the freezer. I'm going to make the Swiss meringue, and I'm using Swiss meringue rather than French. For anyone who doesn't know, the meringue you might have made to make pavlova, that's French meringue, where you're just whisking raw egg whites, sugar, and then you bake it.
Right.
Swiss meringue is, you're essentially cooking it before it's set. So you're going to cook it a little bit over a bain-marie, which is a pot of simmering water, until it reaches a certain point, and that will cook the egg whites. Therefore, it's still malleable. You can pipe it, and then you just only need to put it either under the grill or with a blowtorch, and it's ready to eat. You don't actually have to cook it again. Also, Italian meringue is similar, but with Italian meringue, you're pouring a hot sugar syrup into whipping egg whites.
Okay.
So I am going to separate my eggs first. I'm going to use 4 egg whites for this, a tart of this size, which might leave us with a little bit extra, but you can always bake it in the oven as like little mini meringue nests. So just the egg whites straight into the bowl that you're going to mix it in. I am going to add 270 grams of caster sugar, just straight in to the unwhipped raw egg whites.
Okay. So all of these egg yolks,
Yeah.
how long would they keep in the fridge?
In the fridge, a couple of days. You can freeze them. For this then, the next step is essentially, so I've got in here my sugar and my egg whites.
Yeah.
I'm going to mix those just until they're combined, and then we're going to put them over the pot of simmering water.
Okay.
I like to use a thermometer just to make sure, because the risk with this is if you don't heat them to a high enough temperature, they will hold their shape for a minute, and then you'll put them on what you want to put them on, and then it will drop and go runny again.
Right.
You need to do it. You need to keep them going on the pot of simmering water until they get to at least 70 degrees. But another way you can tell, if you, after a while, if you put your finger in and just run it up the side, you shouldn't be able to feel any granular sugar, and it should be too hot for you to keep your finger in for an extended period of time.
Right.
If you've got those two things, it's probably fine. First, you just literally want to mix it until it's combined.
So you're
like
just
that.
using a hand whisk.
You want to kind of keep moving it around with the whisk, but the aim here is not necessarily to add any air to it. It's literally just to whisk it so that the egg whites don't settle and start cooking, you know, before it's ready.
So we've got the bowl with the egg white mixture over the saucepan that's got some simmering water.
It'll take a few minutes just to get to the right temperature and start dissolving the sugar, but it's quicker than you think.
And will it start to change colour? Because at the moment...
No, it will stay pretty much like this, but it will get... Whereas right now it's very thick and gloopy, it will be really runny when it's ready.
It'll be runny?
Really runny. And then
So
when we whip it, it will get stiff peaks, like a meringue.
Ah, okay.
So this part of the process is literally only to cook the egg whites enough so that firstly you can eat them without baking it again in the oven, and secondly so that it holds its peak even after you've stopped whisking. So you can see already it's getting much more runny.
Yeah.
And I can already feel that there's not as many granules of sugar in there, but I'm going to use my thermometer and just see what temperature we're at. So we're already at 56, 57 degrees.
So that's a probe thermometer that you've got?
Yes. I just have one because I do a lot of this sort of stuff, but I would recommend investing in one because they're not very expensive, and it means you can be quite precise with stuff like this, but there are ways to work around it, you know.
Yeah.
People didn't used to have thermometers that told them the temperature of food, and they would make this recipe. So
it used to be done by look and feel.
Exactly, and you can see it's so much more runny now because the sugar's dissolving. I can feel that there aren't any granules of sugar. So the next step would be that if you could put your finger in but not keep it in, it's probably warm enough.
I'm not going to offer. So thinness-wise...
It's almost like about double cream now, whereas
it's looking
before,
like a starter that's much too thin and will not rise. So everybody that asks me about their starters that have problems is usually because they're too thin. Because they've been made too hot, very much like this.
We've just hit 71 degrees,
okay.
So that is now hot enough.
Do you keep the water on or we turn it off?
No, that's it, we're done with the water now.
Okay.
So just giving that one more whisk with my hand whisk, and then I'm going to get it on the KitchenAid and turn the whisk on this for at high speed for probably about 5-10 minutes, and that will come up to a nice meringue.
Okay, on you go. Sophie?
Yeah.
What we got?
We've got some very nice stiff and shiny meringue, which I would quite happily hold over both of our heads.
Yes,
it's not going to drop.
That looks amazing.
Yes.
So this is something I don't make.
This is
but
now.
They look amazing.
It's fully cooked. This is, so there's no need for it to go in the oven. Yeah, go for it.
So if I tried a bit.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
Oh, it's so white.
It's very nice and stiff. Get it all off the.
It already tastes like the chewy meringue you get in the middle of your meringue.
It's a bit like a marshmallow at this point. So
David, do you want to look a bit? David just sits here on the corner and we just pass things over to him every so often, or we just stand here and eat them so that he has to watch and can't get involved. David's now pulling a face that's going,
Sometimes if you wanted to, you could add a bit of vanilla to this just as it finishes off mixing, or some orange zest or anything. You don't want to add anything like that before it's pretty much done.
Yeah.
Because you don't want any fat getting into this. So any of the oils from the orange, or if there's any fat in anything, it will deflate it before it's risen up. But now that it's risen up, especially because we got it to the right temperature, that's it. It will stay like that now.
So and it can hold the weight of something now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. So
this is the fun bit, isn't it?
Yes. So the next step then is to start assembling our dessert, which calls for ice cream. I'm using vanilla ice cream for this one because I just think it works best. You can make your own. I didn't. I just got Haagen-Dazs. In my opinion, it's the smoothest one that you can buy in the supermarket.
So what I've noticed is you've set it so it's into a bit of a dome.
Yes. So I took it from the freezer, left it out for a bit, and then I lined this bowl with cling film, 2 layers of cling film. And to do that can be quite tricky actually, trickier than it sounds. But what you can do is lay the cling film over and just push it in and then fill the bowl with water, and that will force the cling film to vacuum to the bowl. So that's how you line a bowl with cling film, because it's actually quite tricky.
Say that again. So you put the 2 layers of cling film.
Put the 2 layers one at a time, layer of cling film over the bowl. Just kind of push it in. Don't try and get it too perfect, and then fill the whole thing with water into the cling film, and then tip it out. And that will
push it against it.
It will push it. Otherwise, the cling film just sticks to you. It doesn't stick to the bowl.
But also, then you have no air holes.
Exactly.
Okay.
So I did that 2 layers of cling film, and then froze it overnight in this sort of dome shape, just to make it a bit easier. That will also be something you could do ahead of time, but it will just mean that you don't necessarily need to kind of be messing around with half frozen ice cream.
So it means that you've got that dome shape ready to go, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're now attempting to peel off the cling film.
Peeling off my cling film. The only thing you want to make sure here is that you peel it off in 2 complete layers. If you've got layers that are half done, then they might be in your ice cream later on. So just try and make sure that it all stays pretty much intact.
Yeah, so it doesn't tear.
Yeah.
So you're not losing any.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got a perfect disc of ice cream.
Yes. And
I'm not going to give you the bits of cling film now, David, to scrape the ice cream off.
This is just 1 pint of ice cream because I don't like too much ice cream on my baked Alaska. But if you wanted to pile it high with ice cream, you could well do that. There's my ice cream going straight on
your
top.
Your disc of ice cream on the top. Oh, look, there's some bits that fell off onto the counter.
Oh, my hands are cold. Hands are freezing now. And now what I'm going to do, you want to work fairly quickly at this point, just to prevent your meringue, your ice cream from melting, is I'm going to take some nice big dollops of my meringue and just get it straight on top. And then I'm going to use my spatula, the offset spatula again, just to start spreading it round and making sure that it covers the ice cream completely.
I just think the meringue, when it gets that snowy white colour, it's just amazing.
Well, it's very festive as well, isn't it?
So Sophie is now just using her offset palette knife to spread the meringue over the top.
I want to coax it down. I try not to get it past the edge of my pastry case too much, because I think that looks really nice. Although it's a lot of, lovely meringue on top, you still want it to look precise. If you were going to put this under the grill or back in the oven to brown the meringue, that's where you want to be careful that you're creating a seal in between the ice cream and your cake. So it won't be in there long enough to brown the pastry anymore, but if there are any gaps where there's a vent between the oven and your ice cream, the ice cream will just start melting.
Yeah, so you need to make sure it's well encased, is what you're saying. If you put it under the grill or a broiler, rather than doing it with your blowtorch, because not everyone has a blowtorch.
No, they're pretty cheap. Again, they're not very expensive, so if you are into cooking.
I've always been very jealous because my photographer has one.
Yeah,
I want one of them.
Exactly, that's what I use it for most, is when I do content for Matthews.
Though you can't really use them with bread.
Not so much, no, because it will toast it rather than...
Not that I'd ever need to.
It's too precise for bread.
Yeah, but it ends up just setting bits on fire.
Exactly. So you want to make sure that it's a nice, even dome.
You're just piling it on.
Yeah.
And giving it some nice swirls and swishes.
Yeah, that's the bit. If you're going to do... You don't have to put this under the grill or under a blowtorch if you wanted just to keep this as is. Because the meringue is cooked, it's absolutely fine. You can just keep it nice and bright white.
So you could just eat it gooey like that?
Yeah. And it will still be gooey on the inside if you put it under the grill or anything. It will just brown the top nicely.
Oh, look at the peaks.
But if you are going to
Swirly
do,
peaks.
yeah, if you're going to do the grill or the blowtorch or anything, the key is to create lots of little texture points, because that's what will brown and look lovely.
Okay, so that's what you see.
Yeah.
Okay.
If
so
you have it just smooth,
Yeah.
it will look really odd when you start browning.
Look, it's like snowy peaks.
Okay, I think that's enough meringue. So I'm just going to get my blowtorch.
So again, same question again. Could you save or do something with the leftover meringue?
Yes.
Could we dot that onto a baking tray and bake
Yes.
little meringue pieces?
Yes, completely.
Okay.
That's what I would do with it. You couldn't really save it as in put it in the freezer or anything. There are some recipes you can do with this. So you could actually mix in some melted dark chocolate, and that's a really quick and easy chocolate mousse, because the egg whites are the volume. So that's a great thing to do with it if you don't want to bake it off, but you wouldn't want to just kind of hang on to it like
So
this.
if we were going to, which we probably will, if we dollop some of them onto a baking tray,
Yes.
you still want parchment paper?
Yeah, still parchment paper.
And how, I know you cook low and slow, don't you?
Yeah, you don't need to go as low and slow because it's already cooked.
Yeah.
But I would do 170 for about 30 minutes, but it depends on the size of your dollops.
I will do that afterwards. My husband will appreciate that.
So now I'm going to use my blowtorch to make it look extra lovely.
Look at that.
Let me just adjust my... I always start out with my blowtorch on a lower heat and work your way up.
But also the blowtorch, you need to keep it moving,
Yeah,
don't
moving
you?
all the time.
So you just keep moving around. We've got a real bake-off thing going on in our kitchen here. You can see a couple of the peaks, here's some of the lines starting to toast.
But this is really classic for baked Alaska. You want that sort of very retro browning.
So how long could it be between this and then serving it?
Actually, if your ice cream has been fully in the freezer overnight, you could actually do this probably about half an hour, 40 minutes before you serve it.
Okay, because it's quite pretty solid, the ice cream.
Yeah, exactly. If you've kind of had it out for a while, that drops the time down that you could keep it out for. But to be honest, even if it's a bit melty on the inside, it will still taste delicious. It almost goes a bit more like a custard filling.
So I'm going to get my plate out to put it on.
I've got one more finishing touch after this that I might put on.
Oh, what you got hidden up your
I've
sleeve?
got some gold shimmer.
Oh! Wow!
A little bit more around this side, and then I think that's enough.
Look at that. I mean, just like that would be perfect.
Yes.
Oh, that looks beautiful.
Bit of a twist on the classic, because a baked Alaska is normally a cake base, and although we have got the Frangipane, it's just a bit more adult. I think traditional baked Alaskas sometimes a bit of a bad rep for being very overly sweet, but because we've put the spice in the Frangipane, we've got that kind of sharper jam on the bottom, and then we've got the nice tart plums, it should be quite palatable for everyone. I've got this, it's for cakes, but it comes out in a very fine puff.
I've just got a little shimmer going on.
When it's on your Christmas lights at the table, it will look very nice and shiny. And there you have it.
Oh, Sophie, that's beautiful. That is just beautiful.
It will look lovely on the Christmas table, you know, and it's just as nice and exciting as Christmas pudding, even though you don't set it on fire. But you could always do the blowtorching at the table, so you've still got the fire element. Ready?
So you're going to cut into it, which means I'm going to want to take some photos and some videos. Go for it. We are cutting into the pavlova. I'm recording this so we can show you it from this side. So if you're watching the video, out it comes. Look! Look at
there
that.
You go. It's almost like a self-saucing pudding when the ice cream gets a little bit melty. Like
We're not going to complain, are we?
All the plum jam and the slices of plums and things as well.
Right, it's tasting time.
It tastes just like Christmas. It's the spices, isn't it?
And the orange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all the same flavours, you know, but something I think a bit more palatable to those of us that don't like Christmas pudding or Christmas cake.
I want a bit of the Frangipane. Oh, that is good. It's all quite sweet.
Yeah.
That pastry, you can see the layers.
Yeah. But it's it's just a bit more robust than your classic English shortcrust pastry. If you're a bit nervous about making pastry, it's just so much better, so much easier to handle.
You're listening to Elaine Boddy's The Foodbod Pod with Shanna's Sourdough and Matthews Cotswold Flour.
Shanna's Sourdough has everything you need to start making beautiful sourdough, from the starter to the roaster and everything in between.
Maize Bite from Matthews Cotswold Flour is a speciality pastry flour blend with maize flour to give a crisp golden coloured pastry. Maize Bite is the ideal pastry flour for making mince pies, pie crusts, tarts, biscuits and cookies of all kinds. There's a delicious and easy to make shortbread recipe at cotswoldflour.com, where you can also order Maize Bite from Matthews Cotswold Flour.
Sophie?
Elaine.
I feel like I now need to get on several spin bikes.
See, I feel like I need a big sleep now.
Yeah, and you've got to drive home. So
Yeah.
we need to say goodbye so that you can head off again, because once again, you've come a long, long way to be here, for which we are very, very grateful. We love having you back.
Oh, thanks.
Your creation was astounding. People need to know. She didn't practice this.
People don't need to know.
No, you knew the recipe would work because you've done all the elements, but you've
Yeah.
never put them together.
No, I haven't. No.
And to watch you unveil that and do it straight off is absolutely brilliant.
Thank
So
you,
that
yeah.
needs mega applause.
Oh, thank you very much.
And it looked amazing. It was just brilliant.
It was almost a Christmas miracle.
Oh my word. We're getting a bit gooey now. So thank you again for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being part of the podcast family in the last couple of years. And, you know, this has given me the chance to get to know you more and work with you more and talk to you more, which has been lovely.
Oh, it has been, yeah.
Because we've got more to come again in the new year.
Yes.
With what you and I were doing together.
Yeah.
But I think what you've done today has been amazing. You've not only shown people, you know, a different dessert to make, but also we've now got meringues cooking in the oven using the leftover meringue.
Yeah.
And all the tips and everything that you just roll off your tongue.
There's hopefully a lot of techniques in that dessert that you can cherry pick as and when. So take elements of it, use them for something else, Frankenstein it and do your own thing.
Pimp it.
Pimp it.
Maximalise it.
Maximalise
That's the
it.
word
That's
of this
the only
episode.
rule. It must
Maximalise
be
it.
Maximalist for Christmas.
Maximalist. Well, that's going to be our sign-off word. We wish you a maximalist,
Christmas.
Enjoy it. If you make
Yeah.
this fabulous creation, please let us know.
Yes, I want to see pictures.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's been fabulous.
Guys.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Now that you've wiped all the meringue from round your chops, David.
It was absolutely delicious. I mean, I would have taken just the Frangipane with the plums on top in that beautiful pastry tart, let alone the ice cream and then the Swiss meringue on top.
Just amazing. I've never made any kind of baked Alaska like that. It's always something I've seen done and not too sure how they've managed it. But watching Sophie manipulate the meringue, then blowtorching the peaks and all of it, but even just the pastry case was perfect.
Yeah.
And the pastry was lovely.
It was,
and the Frangipane, you know, and it is an occasion cake. It's a special thing.
Oh, absolutely.
So, you know, that's why you make something like that for a special occasion.
and it's so inventive of Sophie to put that together. I mean, quite extraordinary.
When you watch her work, I mean, it just she doesn't take a breath.
No.
She's probably got the most recipes actually in our podcast.
I think she has.
Yeah, and if you think as well, quite a range going from ramen noodles and then up to this being like the pinnacle. She can turn her hand really to so much, anything that's made with flour.
Yes.
Or even not, you know, to just... I mean, we said this before when she was on before. She's so young.
Yeah.
And she knows so much.
Yeah.
And it's just such a vast knowledge and experience and capability. And it just to know that, well, if this goes a bit too far, you could do this, and if this doesn't work, you can do that.
Yes.
And I suppose it's like I would be with sourdough. It depends what your thing is. But it just seems vast to me with her
she's
level
instinctive
of baking.
in the same way that you're instinctive when it comes to sourdough. I mean, that's one of the joys for me, watching you and Sophie, not just together, but separately as well, because what you do is instinctive. Well, that was great, and thoroughly enjoyed seeing Sophie Carey again. And I guess we should say at this point that it's time to say farewell, because this is the end of the Foodbod Pod as the podcast as we know it.
It is. For us, we feel we've come to a natural end. We've done everything we wanted to do.
Yeah.
We've talked to so many amazing people. We've visited them. They've visited us. And for us at our points in our life,
Yes.
but also with what we've done, we feel that we can bring this to a nice natural stop.
Quit when you're ahead, as they say, in business and in sport.
Can I just say before we carry on, this is not to say that the episodes won't be available to listen to.
No, very importantly.
The podcast will remain live. The episodes will remain there. You'll still be able to find them.
And download them for the first time if you've not heard them before.
Yeah, and the recipes will be there. I've got a lot of sourdough tips on here from this year that are very useful for me to still have links to on my website. So that will all remain there. We just won't be recording any new episodes.
And I think it's also important to say, Elaine, that the Foodbod sourdough website will continue.
Oh yes, nothing changes with
all
that
your
stuff.
other activities.
Yeah,
So this is
yeah.
not the end of you and baking. And
No, just the podcast. It's just the end of you and me, David.
I know, it's so sad.
We're
It's so
breaking
sad.
up.
We're breaking, and it's such a hard thing to do. Neil Sedaka, 1968.
Yeah, I'm not going to use that one in my spin class.
But it's been great. I mean, I remember going back to the very, very early days of our early discussions and what we could make of this. And I think it's lived up to all our expectations, and terrific support from Matthews Cotswold Flour in the 2 years we've been doing this, and this year also from Shanna's Sourdough. And we had great support from all the people we've interviewed, all the demonstrations, all the home chefs and the cooks. It's just been spectacular. And so thank you very much indeed to everyone who's contributed, but mostly to Elaine Boddy.
Oh, and to you, David Treadway. For anybody that never listened to the first episode or that's new here, this was all David's idea. So David came to me with the idea. David wanted to give a podcast a try and thought I was the right person. So this is all thanks to you that this happened.
Well, I just saw an opportunity for you to reach a wider audience offline, as well as your online stuff, through podcasts. And I've been wanting to do a podcast for a number of years. I used to be a radio professional, so I kind of am used to the audio world, but I'd never done a podcast. So it seemed to me a happy marriage.
This is also what I've benefited from then is your radio experience, because you've taught me about, positions of mics, about how I'm presenting, how I'm talking. I enjoy interviewing, I love doing it. And you've given me the opportunity to actually do that and talk to people and actually develop more one of my skills. So, this is not necessarily meant to be a love fest going on here, but it's true. It's true. We've given each other an opportunity to do something different.
Yeah, and it's been such an enjoyable experience working together.
I'm very big on highlighting other people and what other people can do and achieve in their kitchens. And we've been able to do that as well and bring other people to a new audience, which I think is great. Yeah. We've brought some new recipes to your kitchen.
Exactly.
Because David has cooked a lot of the different things we've featured.
I remember the first thing I cooked was a Sophie Rushton Smith recipe from way back in 2023, in the early part of our first season. And it was a baked feta on queen butter beans in a tomato sauce that she demonstrated and showed us how to do. And then the four of us, including Sophie's husband Gavin, sat down and ate it for lunch with some sourdough bread. Wonderful, fantastic.
And you've cooked my recipes.
Oh yeah,
and you've cooked some Spice Kitchen recipes.
Oh, Spice Kitchen. I did a whole Indian food night with some friends using all of Sanjay's and his mum's recipes from the book. Wonderful stuff. Absolutely brilliant. If anybody has not seen the Spice Kitchen cookbook yet, do look at it.
Yeah,
do search it out. It's absolutely wonderful.
For me, I think, there's many highlights. I got lots of people that I love on the podcast, but I did enjoy this summer having a pizza lesson from Scott.
Yeah.
And picking up that dough and working with it and shaping it. I really enjoyed that, to the extent that an uni may have fallen into the shopping basket.
When we did our first programme with him, our first episode with him back in the middle of 2023, within a week I bought myself an uni, and
I think quite a few people did.
Yeah.
How long it then took them to unbox it, I don't know.
Well, I unboxed mine straight away. I would say it took me quite a long time. I've got the gas model like you. It took me quite a long time to get to know how to use it properly, and also how to produce a decent sourdough pizza base, again thanks to you. And your brother-in-law Simon, again back in 2023, that amazing episode we recorded at his butchery, and just watching him prepare a shoulder of pork, butchering a quarter of a pig. And I know you're vegetarian, and some of our listeners
still appreciate every skill.
What amazing skills, amazing skills. And I that was a real education and eye-opener for me.
And we must make sure everybody remembers that they're still online is the episodes from this last Christmas. We had 2 episodes.
Indeed. 2
lush Irish Christmases, which with Cherie Denham and Tracy Toner from Northern Ireland. And you've got all of their Christmas recipes and tips still on there. And the joy of listening to them sing Jingle Bells. So they, and all these things are still there. We've got, Stu's there with his nuts.
Yes.
The guys are there with the crickets. We've got the cheeses, so all these things are still online, and there's still a lot of inspiration there.
And in the first season, we recorded a wonderful episode with Annie Archie, where she taught us how to braid dough, specifically with challah in mind, but also you can use it in so many different ways. And then we did another programme with her earlier this year, by which time Anne had diagnosed celiac, so has had to completely change the way she bakes, and now only bakes, for her own consumption at least, gluten-free bread and cakes and so on. And that was another eye-opener for me, just watching someone make a delicious loaf of bread without using traditional wheat in the way we do in sourdough.
It's fascinating, actually, because if you think she's had to change her entire life and change everything, because she is a baker, change everything she makes, not just with baking, but all of her food choices. And once you start to watch her posts and read about it, you realise how gluten appears in things you would not expect. And now Anne is teaching other people, and she's putting together more and more recipes and more tips for it. So I think that was quite an interesting journey to have her from being here with a yeasted bread to then a year later, she is fully diagnosed celiac. And for people to understand, celiac is a disease, it's not an intolerance. It is a disease where you are basically allergic to gluten. So there was a good learning element to that as well, which I thought was interesting. And when she came last year and Corinne came with her for the day, Corinne made us a fabulous red lentil soup.
She did.
Which you can still find on the website. We have the recipe for that on the website. We've eaten a lot of good food, David.
We have, and my wife blames you for my weight problem. We have eaten well.
Yeah, and believe me, my spinners, they blame you for the hard classes.
But we've had a really enjoyable time. And I'm sure we both hope that our podcast listeners have enjoyed some of the fun when they're listening to the episodes that we've had in actually making them, because it's been a hoot.
Oh, it has. It's always a joy to have food going on that David can't try or reach because he's too busy with the recording.
You may well see a hand come into some of the YouTube videos from time to time as I reach for a slice of this or a piece of that.
The thing is, the more we talk about it, it's sad to bring it to an end, but it's the right time for both of us.
Yeah.
I've had such lovely feedback about the podcast. I really hope people have enjoyed it. I thank you again for this opportunity and idea. Massive thanks to our sponsors who have enabled us to do this. And please do check them out. Matthews flours are that's all I use. I love them.
Yeah,
That's
me
all
too.
I use. And Shanna, if you need any baking equipment, any sourdough equipment in the States, she is your person
Yeah,
and she will look after you. And we thank them so much for supporting us. You know, they enable us to do what we've done and bring what we've done to everybody listening.
And so, for the last time, it's time to say this has been the Foodbod Pod with
Me, Elaine Boddy,
and me, David Treadway,
brought to you with Matthews Cotswold Flour.
and Shanna Sourdough. And for the final time,
Thank you for listening.
and goodbye.